The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business Podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Our podcast is hosted by Mesa Chamber of Commerce CEO Sally Harrison. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business Podcast.
This is Sally Harrison. I'm the president of the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, and this morning I am in the podcast studio with my friend James Christensen of Gateway Bank. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
Yeah, good to be here indeed. We're following our back in person kind of hybrid meeting for our Mesa Financial Network. We just ended a meeting and had a good turnout, but really good conversation. So thank you for being the chair for that committee. It's very appreciated.
Absolutely.
And for your leadership in the industry, not just in Mesa, but I know you're very involved in the state. Let's talk about some of the things that came out of that meeting, because it was a good meeting and there was a lot of great discussion. Let's start with, we had somebody represented from Senator Sinema's office. And it was nice to hear kind of on a congressional level what was happening.
Yeah, so our presentation from Senator Sinema's staff really gave us an update, first of all, on what's been on national news with the infrastructure spending and everything that comes along with that. And then also touched on some of the banking issues and really how to make, really what we're continually looking at is how to make banking more consumer and business friendly. Mm-hmm. And what can we do. Really, Mesa Financial Network is really to have the Senator's office hear our perspective on the front lines of, we know what you're trying to do, here's what is being proposed, here's how we think that's going to impact the industry, and here's what's good, and here's what might need to be tweaked a little bit. So they've been in on someone from the team has been in on all of our meetings.
Yes. It's
great to finally be back up and running again, and the hybrid probably opens it up to even more people to get more input, because we have banks, credit unions, large banks, small banks, financial industries, pretty
Mortgage.
much all different kinds of anything related to financing or banking, anything financial in general.
Right.
So I think it gives it's really a lot of input for the Senator's office to hear. For us to hear what they're working on, what's important to them, and then what we can do to either support that or help rewrite, tweak.
Sure. Well, it's a two-way conversation, and that's the important piece of that. And it is a nice thing that they've been able to get somebody here every month that we've had it. And we did take a little break, but I think you guys were all pretty busy over the last year.
Yeah, PPP and everything kept everyone incredibly busy, and it's been. The great thing about the Mesa Financial Network is it's really not, this committee, we're not in competition.
No.
We represent the whole spectrum. My input is just my input.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm, it's just like anything else. I'm learning as much or more than everybody else in the room from their perspective.
Sure.
And so whether it's a small credit union, small bank, large bank, fintech, it's like, how does this work in your industry? And it's like, oh, okay, that either it's like, okay, we're on the same page, or no, okay, I understand where you're coming from and why it's important to look at it that way. So just to give you an example, like for our next meeting, we're talking about all different kinds of things, but we're talking about really ways to crypto banking and the mix, what that looks like. I mean, that's obviously top of mind.
Right.
And then really for another issue is looking at ways that the banks and credit unions can deploy their excess liquidity and what that looks like, and how we might be able to invest in different Arizona funds and to really support Arizona, but also use up some of our liquidity. Mm-hmm. And then also, we're talking about ordinance on trafficking and just really things that what impacts the community impacts the financial institutions. So it all ties together. So we never seem to have a lack of things to talk about. And
not in this world.
And we don't have too many shy people on the call. So it's
which is important.
Yes.
So you mentioned PPP. Obviously, that was something that you guys all were so busy with over the last year. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so really what we were discussing about PPP this morning was just kind of a little update on what each of our institutions did, how it was handled, how has it flowed, how's it worked with the regulators, how's it worked with the SBA, what issues and concerns, what pluses, and really, I think everyone's seeing really good success on the forgiveness, especially on round one, and round two's already started, and round two's moving much quicker and more efficient than round one, which makes sense if we were just kind of figuring our way at the beginning. And then also what some of the opportunities are, and probably one of the big issues for everyone and all the financial institutions I talk to is liquidity. It's caused a tremendous amount of liquidity to be pumped into the system. And now how do we deploy that? What's good? And the good side, there was some really good fee income on the PPP loans. That's honestly where you made all your money. The interest rate on PPP loans is 1%, so it certainly wasn't coming from that. But really, it PPP was whether you liked the way it was fully rolled out or not. When COVID hit and we expected, okay, we're going to prepare for the worst case scenario and pray to God for the best case. And honestly, I think for by far the large majority of businesses, it turned out, and banks, it turned out best case because of those funds flowing into the system and helping them through that period of time and figuring out, okay, how do I pay my staff? How do I keep my team up and work through this? And I think that, was there some money wasted? Absolutely. Did it take the sting out of what could have been a really ugly downturn? Absolutely.
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine what would have happened to our small businesses had PPP not been available.
Yeah, it was a lifesaver for some companies. For other companies, honestly, it was a windfall in round one. The nice part about round two, it was more targeted. You had to show you had often revenues, and so it went to those that still needed the ongoing help. So hopefully we don't have to have round three.
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies are even stronger than they were before this started because of PPP, and people, are really being cognizant to work with the local firms and continue to use them. So yeah,
Well, before we wrap up, there's two other things I wanted to ask you about. Staffing has been a big issue across all of our industries in Mesa, everywhere. Talk about how it's affected the banks.
Yeah, so one of the big issues, we're like everyone else, is we don't have enough. We just don't have enough employees, and it's really as we grow, and all the financial institutions and credit unions have grown over the last 2 years, pretty substantially across the board, really fully across the board. And what we're seeing is with COVID that one of the major changes that took place is people either fully worked remote or they worked hybrid. And how do we adapt to that? It's not that I don't think you can find people that are motivated and you can measure their work and they can work from home. But when you have some smaller institutions, how do you operate a full service location and have the majority of your staff be like, I'd rather work from home?
Right.
Fortunately, the majority doesn't want to do that with us, but finding new people has been very, very difficult. So folks are willing to take a discount, a little less income to work from home, which is nice. It's really not the main concern for the banks. It's not really worried about the pay. It's just how do we operate the branch? And also how do you build team? How do you build team when the majority of your team is working from home and they're not around anyone else? Right. So it's really also in Gateway in particular, it's really in our DNA to be our team and how we work together and build that camaraderie and long-term, tenure at the bank. So I know, pretty much across the board, all the banks and credit unions I've talked to have open positions and really good paying jobs. The other thing that's interesting, and we really didn't touch on this morning yet, was there's not a lot of folks out of college going into banking. There's some really, really good paying jobs, a lot of high paying jobs right out of school that they could get involved with. And so I think that's part of it as well, is we're not seeing that part of the talent pool come into banking, which I think, maybe we need to do a better job of telling people what we do and why this is a career that they ought to consider. It's not the way we bank at Gateway and the way you bank at a lot of the credit unions and banks now is not what it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be really interesting and fun, and it's, probably some folks going, banking fun. And but
I've been to your bank. It's fun in there.
Fun. Yeah, we have a good time.
Nice.
So yeah, that's an area that has become a really big issue, and one that we need to figure out how do we as an industry adapt to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, one more thing. Let's talk about our special guest speaker this morning from
American Bankers Association.
Yes.
So yeah, we had Diana Banks on this morning from Washington, D.C.
Interesting last name for her profession.
Yeah, Banks, you gotta love that. But she gave us a full presentation on the Bank on Certified Accounts, and really what this is. It's not a new program, but it's really been pushed and active the last few years. Is how do we create a product at the bank that we can bring on those that are unbanked, the huge amount of households across the U.S. that have no bank accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And so you come up with an account where you have an account where you can't charge overdraft fees. You have, you can open an account with $5, and you still have the same products and services and robust offerings that any account would have. You just don't have all the fees associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having a lot of success. It's slowly building, and there's more banks adopting that. And I think, we spent a lot of time this morning talking about, the non-bank community. How do you build that trust to get them to say, well, it sounds good, but I'm still not sure I trust the bank and where we're going on this. But I think it's really getting community buy-in and having local leaders, local churches, really telling people what this product is. And honestly, it would save so much money for a lot of folks that are paying fees to have checks cashed and dealing in cash, and to have an option at a bank that makes sense for them.
Well, lots of information. Hopefully we can get some of that out for our membership. James, if anybody wants to contact you, contact Gateway, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure, you can get a hold of me at 480-358-1000. You can also check us out on our website at www.gcbaz.com.
And you have a great newsletter that goes out all the time.
We do. We're not your typical newsletter.
No, you're not. I think it's fun.
We cover all kinds of topics. There's usually something banking in there, but we're also touching on things that are important to the community, important to me.
Very cool. Well, I like just being able to meet some of your staff through your newsletter too. That's fun. Thanks for being on the podcast with us today. Thanks for a great meeting this morning, and we will see you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.